The nervous system. So the nervous system is kind of complicated. It's the major control system of the human body, but I think we can simplify it to just the stuff that you need to know to understand the terminology that you have to learn. So as usual, I'm going to talk about the functions and the anatomy of the nervous system, and then I'll get into the word parts that are specific to the nervous system. The central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. They're responsible for all of your cognition, the perception, the integration of information, the storage of past information, the integration of current events with past events, perception of all of your sensory information, and creation of new thoughts. The peripheral nervous system is everything outside of the brain and spinal cord and consists of a sensory side and a motor side. The sensory side is responsible for carrying information into the central nervous system. And so that would include the conscious sensations like touch and temperature and sound and sight, but it also carries other kinds of sensory information that does not reach your conscious mind. Things like what your blood pressure is, what your heart rate is, what the ionic concentration of the blood is, all sorts of information that the brain needs to keep track of, but doesn't translate to the conscious mind. On the motor side of things, that's information leaving the central nervous system. Basically instructions to control the basic body parts. And again, we have motor information that is consciously controlled, and that is our instructions to our skeletal muscles. And then we have motor information that is not controlled consciously, that is involuntary, and that would be innervating things like smooth muscles, cardiac muscle, and certain specific endocrine glands. That unconscious control that is referred to as autonomic. Part of that whole responsibility of the central nervous system in integration of information, that also involves behavior and emotions and beliefs, and that gets us into psychology and psychiatry, which comes from the Greek for mind, psyche. So there will be some psychiatric terms in this section. So just quick anatomy of the brain. On the left you see a medial section of the brain. This is a medial sagittal section. Around the top, and you can see this in the lateral view of the brain, are the lobes of the cerebrum. So the cerebrum kind of sits right on top of the brain, and it consists of the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. And deep inside you have a limbic lobe and also something called the insula. The cerebrum is generally overall responsible for the things we think of when we think of the mind. Is where we perceive all of our sensory information. It's also the site where all of our motor information for our voluntary movements, our skeletal muscle movements originates. It's where we think and reason, where we are creative, come up with new ideas, and do art. It's also the control over our emotions. So it is basically what we would think of as the mind. Sitting down below the occipital lobe in the back here is the cerebellum. The cerebellum has several different functions, and we're still learning more and more about it. This is responsible for coordinating motor activity, so coordinating your skeletal muscles, and as a result of that has a large role to play in speech. Deep buried underneath the cerebrum, we have the thalamus, and below that, the hypothalamus, and I mentioned the hypothalamus, we'll talk about that in the endocrine system. And then the brainstem, which consists of the midbrain, the pons, which is this egg-shaped area here, and this little bump called the medulla oblongata. Together, those three things are what we consider to be the lizard brain. It was the first to evolve, and it controls our most basic life functions, things like heart rate, blood pressure, breathing reflexes, that kind of very, very basic functions to keep our bodies humming. The central nervous system, both the brain and the spinal cord, are surrounded by three membranes. They come up often in medical terminology, so I'm going to point them out here. The dura mater is the outermost. It sits just underneath the bone, and it stands for tough mother. Dura is the same root we get durable from, so that's the tough mother, the nice thick membrane. Deep to that, we have the arachnoid membrane, which means spider mother, and it gets its name because of these web-like filaments that you see here. The cerebrospinal fluid that bathes the central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord, flows through the arachnoid mater, through that webbing. And then very deep Right up against the surface of the central nervous system, almost shrink-wrapped to the surface, is the pia mater, which means delicate mother. And over here on the right, you can see the tough outer fibrous dura mater, and deep to that is the arachnoid mater, and then right up against the spinal cord, you have the pia mater. So work parts related to the nervous system. Cerebro and encephalo both refer to the brain, cerebrum specifically. A cerebropathy would be a disease in the cerebrum. I mentioned cerebrospinal fluid. That's a fluid that surrounds both the cerebrum and the spine. Encephalitis would be an inflammation of the brain. Cerebello, of course, refers to the cerebellum. So anything having to do with the cerebellum is cerebellar. Or you could have a cerebellitis, an inflammation of the cerebellum. Lobo, context specific, it means lobe. So lobotomy would mean an incision into a lobe, in this context, a lobe of the brain, but there are other organs that have lobes, so you got to be sure of your context so you know which lobe you're talking about. Or a lobectomy, removal of a lobe of the brain in this context. Cephalo refers to the head, so microcephaly refers to a small head, and macrocephaly would be a large, unusually large head. Meningio and meningo refer to those three membranes around the central nervous system, the dura mater, the arachnoid mater, and the pia mater. The singular of the word meninges, that's a plural, is meninx. So if you have meningitis, you have an inflammation of one or more of the meninges. Meningopathy is a disease of the meninges. Duro refers specifically to that outermost tough meninx. So epidural means on top of the dura. So this is usually medicine that is delivered by injection on top of the dura mater somewhere, usually in the spinal cord, but not always. A subdural hematoma then would be a mass, oma, of blood under the dura mater. Basically, it's a bleed or a bruise underneath the dura mater. And you'll hear the arachnoid membrane be referred to in similar ways, like a subarachnoid bleed. Neuro refers to nerves. So neuralgia is nerve pain. Neuropathy is a nerve disease. Ganglio means a ganglion, which is a cluster of individual nerve cell bodies. A gangliitis then would be an inflammation of one of those clusters of nerve cell bodies, a ganglion. Myelo, it refers to the spinal cord. Myelitis would be an inflammation of the spinal cord. Myelodysplasia would be a bad development of the spinal cord. When they first were studying human anatomy and they came across this substance inside the vertebrae, they didn't really know what it was, so they just kind of gave it the name marrow. Later on, we learned that it was nerves and began to call it the spinal cord, but the myelo stuck. So again, myelo is going to be context specific. Aesthesio refers to sensation. So anesthesia means not sensation, a condition of not sensation. Hyperesthesia would be a condition of too much sensation. You're overly sensitive. Phaso refers to speech. So aphasia refers to a condition of not speaking. That's literally how it translates. Functionally, it's used to refer to a number of different speech disorders. Psycho refers to the mind. And phreno kind of has a dual meaning. It originally, in the original Greek, meant the seat of all emotions. And they thought that that was in the chest. So it also is used to refer to the diaphragm, which is near the heart, which is the seat of emotions in ancient Greece. Phreno got to mean the seat of emotions. In this context, it just means mind. So frenetic in this context would mean referring to the mind. When we get to the respiratory chapter, Fren will refer to the diaphragm. Psychology, of course, is the study of the mind. All three of these, somno, somni, and hypno, refer to sleep. So somnography is a procedure to measure sleep. And rather than actually measuring the sleep, they're going to be measuring things like brain activity, heart rate, blood pressure, all sorts of things about sleep to be able to diagnose, say, a sleeping disorder. Insomnia is a lack of sleep, of course. Hypnosis is a condition of sleep. That's literally how it translates functionally. It's more a condition of sleep-like condition. We've had this before. Gnosio refers to knowledge. Agnosia is a condition of not knowing. Diagnosis, as we've had before, means a condition of knowing through, to thoroughly know what's going on. And a prognosis is a condition of knowing going forward. So we know what is likely to happen. A mania is an unusual exuberance or obsession. So pyromania is obsession with fire. Kleptomania is an obsession with taking. I think we all know phobia means fear. So photophobia means a fear of light. Having said that, that's literally how it translates. Functionally, it's typically that bright lights are causing pain, and so the person shies away from bright light as if they were afraid. Hydrophobia literally translates as a fear of water, but it's most commonly brought up as a symptom of rabies. People who have advanced rabies are so afraid of water that they shy away from it. Aparesis means a weakening or a partial paralysis. So hemiparesis would be a weakening on one side of the body caused by problems with the nervous system, getting the message to the muscles. Plegia means complete paralysis. So a quadriplegia would be a paralysis of all four limbs, again, caused by some nervous system issue, getting the information from the brain to the muscles. Asthenia means a weakness. So myasthenia means weakness in the muscles.